Good evening and welcome to the Daily Drum for this Thursday, June 5th, 2025. I'm Molette Green sitting in for Harold Fisher, who has the week off. Well, tonight we conclude our three-part series on survivors' remorse, a deep and personal look into the emotional toll of government layoffs. Our final conversation takes us inside the life of a federal worker still on the job, navigating a reduction in force, shrinking budgets, and an increased workload. This while grappling with the guilt of staying employed as friends and colleagues pack up their desks. She's fighting to stay focused, stay compassionate, and simply stay employed. Her story coming tonight, plus more coping tips and strategies. So let's introduce our guest this evening. Dr. C, a current federal employee navigating the complexities of the government's ongoing reduction in force. Due to the nature of her work, Dr. C will remain off camera and we will not use her full name. And also with us this evening, Dr. Vanessa Weaver. She is back to help guide us through this very delicate conversation. She is a nationally renowned organizational psychologist with more than 30 years of helping organizations navigate the emotional and psychological impact of change. She joins us to discuss survivor syndrome and how it affects individuals, teams, and workplace culture. Dr. C, Dr. Weaver, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So, Dr. C, we want to begin with you. And how did you first learn about the reduction in force? What was your initial reaction to all of this?
I think I learned about it much like the rest of America through media. It was announced that we would be undergoing a reduction in force. I think that was right around the time people were randomly, it seemed, being placed on administrative leave or coming into work and their offices were empty or doors were locked, or all of that was happening all at the same time. And I was learning in real time what was going on. That's how that came to be.
And I can only imagine how tough that was. Because did you feel like your job was being protected, or at the time, did you feel like you were at risk of losing your job? What was it like for you?
Oh, absolutely. I thought everybody was at risk. When the reduction in force came for DEI and things of that nature, I definitely thought that some of the work that I do, some of the things that I dabble in, or just some of the associations I have would mark me. No one knew. We didn't know. It seemed quite random, the grabs of termination. There was no rhyme or reason to it in the beginning, and I think it caused a lot of angst and just trying to know. I didn't know. From day to day, I didn't know. And I knew a lot of people who were immediately placed on that administrative leave. And we were all just waiting for the moment when it would be us.
And so has it settled down now? Are things still kind of, quote, crazy in the office? Are you still waiting on more people to be fired? What's the atmosphere like right now?
It's a little different now because they added the element of choice. So at first it was random. Nobody had a choice. You were here today, gone tomorrow. But then they offered that deferred resignation and early retirements. And so it's a different uncertainty because of the nature of both of those options that federal workers have been given. The nature of that alone, you don't know when your workforce, your is going to go from the number you have today to a totally different number tomorrow, because there are people who have opted to participate in that who do not have to notify anyone that they have opted to participate. And you wake up the next morning and you have a whole new workload because you've lost 10 people. It's a different kind of uncertainty.
I want to talk about that workload in just a moment, but I want to bring in Dr. Weaver to talk about what we've been talking about, survivor's remorse, and just what you've heard so far from Dr. C.
Well, Dr. C has just so eloquently described some of the main symptoms of survivor remorse. Survivor remorse is the psychological aftermath that employees feel when there's been a major restructuring or downsizing of their organization. And although many people say you're lucky to have a job, they often don't feel lucky. I often call them the lucky unlucky ones, because the organization's culture, the colleagues, the notion of how they do their work, the priorities, how they get evaluated and compensated, all of that is in flux. And so it contributes to a high level of anxiety that people feel, wondering, is it, am I next? What are the rules of the game? Who's going to be my supervisor? Who's going to be on my team? It's just a lot of unknowns. And also people feel guilt because they're the ones that kept the job when people that they care about or that they knew were very competent and high contributors in the organization were let go. And this burnout and emotional numbness, isolation like this, I better just kind of stay to myself and not talk a lot to other people because I can't trust who's in the organization or what's going to be said. And just this fear of anxiety, as Dr. C so eloquently said, am I going to be next?
Right.
And if I choose not to take this package, I'm choosing to stay in a job, hopefully a career that I'm not sure how to navigate or what it's going to turn out to be.
And Dr. C, whether you have chosen to stay or whether your job is just secure for now, whatever the option has been for you, you mentioned workload. So your workload has increased because your coworkers, you have fewer coworkers or colleagues. Tell me what that's been like. And more importantly, how do you feel? What are your emotions surrounding that? Are you angry about it?
I'm not angry. That's not the emotion that I feel. But to Dr. Weaver's point, that emotional numbness, excuse me, I would say that it's moving so much and doing so much, you don't necessarily have time to feel. You don't have time to, because there's so much that has to be done. It doesn't stop. And so I think what I feel sometimes is overwhelmed. I feel kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because we have to prove, number one, that our jobs are valuable and needed. So we have to work a certain, towards the mission and get it done. But we also need to show you that there are consequences to some of these things and decisions we've made to let people go and reduce the force. And some things just won't get done. And being kind of pushed between those two of that's a tough place to be at best. And it's I wouldn't say angering, but it's a very frustrating place to be because you feel like you're spinning your wheels.
Dr. Weaver, speak on that. Rock in a hard place she's talking about. That scares me hearing that because I see burnout coming.
Burnout and a sense of hopelessness, right? It's,
absolutely.
One, if I do it, this is the consequence. If I don't do it, this is the consequence. And what do I do? And it's important when you get to that point that you call a timeout to say, let me take a time out, and kind of reclaim myself. And Dr. C, that might mean, taking a day off and going to the spa, or just sitting in your house and just trying to just let yourself get centered, because you do have a choice. And if you chose to stay in that organization, you chose to stay for a reason. That might be you're primary breadwinner in your household, or you got children that you got to put to college, or you just have to take care of yourself. So part of this is like not letting yourself feel guilty because you had to make a decision around how you have to live this part of your life, and recognize that even in making that choice, you can be more empowered. You can empower yourself by saying, what are the things that I can do in this role that, number one, help the organization and help me? To be very intentional about saying, I'm not going to be stuck. I refuse to be stuck. And so I'm going to move from being unstuck. And that means feeling empowered and taking some steps where you're making decisions around how you're going to make the best of where you are, and letting the guilt go, or the questions go that, wow, I had to stay here, and I really might have preferred to leave and pursue that dream I had to do something else. But I got to stay here because my finances or whatever require me, or I'm close to retirement. So, let the guilt go, and then take a time out. It doesn't have to be a long one, but take a time out, and then say, what can I do in the situation that I'm in to gain the best that I can do?
What do you want to say about that, Dr. C?
That resonates with me so much. You talk about survivor's remorse. I call it buyer's remorse. We bought into this system of the good government powerful job and having, the job stability and security. And I promise you, I feel like I bought a lemon sometimes, and I'm having remorse just in choosing this career path sometimes. And I see my colleagues and coworkers having that same remorse, that this was something we chose for stability. This is something we chose for all of the things that now seemingly are gone. So that really resonates with me, that you absolutely have to take a moment to reclaim yourself, reclaim your time, to quote Auntie Max. You have to, because otherwise you will get to burnout. And I think that's a really relevant and poignant point you made.
And I would also say, Dr. C, if I can,
that go ahead.
In making this choice, I would ask you to sit down and make a list of all the skills that you either develop or cultivated in the role that you're in. Because right now it might feel like I made a bad choice and, it's a lemon, like you said. But I would guarantee you, when you sit down and make that list of where you started and where you are now, you're going to see so many skills that you developed, and you're going to identify the contributions you made to the organization. And you probably realize that maybe it isn't so much a lemon as I think about it now, because I got the emotional piece that's going on with me. But I gained a lot here, and I'm going to decide how I leverage all of these strengths that I've gained.
Yeah. And I know that your colleagues, your coworkers are still are feeling the same kinds of emotions. What do you guys talk to each other about on the job? Do you talk about these feelings at all? Do you feel safe talking about these feelings, Dr. C?
So it's very interesting. I don't think my colleagues and I talk about it, but I am in a position where I get to talk to the workforce about it often. And so the colleagues and I know, I don't know if it's a timing thing, a fear thing. I don't know what that is. I don't know if we're just working too much to sit down and have time to talk about it with each other. But the conversations that we're having with the workforce, that I am having with the workforce, I think in a time where we are kind of turning back to a sort of grassroots conversation with how we're going to be working now. You hear different the strategy for moving, I'm trying to choose my words very carefully, but the strategies for moving forward, or we're going to do more with less, and all of these things. And the people creating the strategies have their level of emotional intelligence that does not necessarily translate to the workforce. And it's a whole nother kind of fear. It's a different level of fear when they're coming to have these conversations, because something as simple as I wasn't included on the email can make someone feel like tomorrow they're going to be walking me out. Because and it's not even what that is necessarily, but because of the constant flux we're in, and I think the inability to address it on such a compassionate and emotionally intelligent level, that people are just struggling to survive. And by the time they're calling me, the struggle is oh so real.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. I mean, there's no sense of safety and security emotionally. Is that what you're saying?
Well, not if you're looking forward in your in your job right now in the workforce. No, that's not where you're going to find your sense of safety and security. But you can find it in other places, right? That's what we're here talking about. But no, it's definitely not in your 9 to 5 right now. That is not where your security, strength, or safety will come from.
So what are you saying to them when you're having these conversations, if they're coming to you with that level of stress?
Always try to broaden perspectives, because it's the nature of what Dr. Weaver described. She used the word specifically, isolation.
Yeah.
And isolation, I always say, is one of those tricky things that is designed to make you feel alone. And so reminding them, opening the perspective. I think I heard Dr. Boudreaux yesterday speaking about how she reminds her employees that she's in this with them. And just reminding them that they're not alone in this conversation or in this experience. Also, let's talk about, maybe that the email that you weren't included on was, let's talk about all the different scenarios that could be that don't include tomorrow you're going to be terminated.
Right.
Let's just have all the conversations. What else could it possibly be?
And it sounds to me, Dr. Weaver, like Dr. C has explained, and Dr. Boudreaux yesterday, our guest yesterday, voiced, their roles have slightly changed in their jobs because of what the atmosphere is like.
Right.
And now they have turned into comforters in their roles, which is an added layer of stress in and of itself.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to deal with your own stress and stuff, and then you have to take that on. But Dr. C made an important point, which I think is so important, to broaden your perspective.
Yeah.
When you feel vulnerable, you feel like you're not being taken care of, you don't really understand how decisions are going to be made. You don't know, you think you know your rights, but maybe you don't know them as fully as maybe you should. Then that intensifies the I don't want to call, I'm going to use the term paranoia. I don't mean it in a negative or insulting way, but I'm saying that, like, that memo can take a life of its own bigger than what not being included on that memo can take a life of its own bigger than that, bigger than what the intent is. And so it's important to broaden perspectives, like Dr. C mentioned, and really test and challenge the assumptions you make. Because if you don't test and challenge those assumptions, then you're going to begin to operate on them like they're real, and they may not be real. So that is extremely important. And the point of connecting with other people and having conversations with other people, and in those conversations, challenging, some of the statements or reconfirming some of those is critically important. And I would also say, Molette, this just reinforces what we talked about with Dr. Boudreaux yesterday and Dr. C mentioned. The role of the supervisor is so critically important
Yeah.
in helping to really mitigate some of the kind of remorse or the intensity of the survivor remorse for those folks. And so I really would encourage organizations to really invest in providing some training to those supervisors on how they can be effective in really supporting their people, because the people have to do the work. And if the data is showing 66% of the people are stressed out, 25% feel like, there's 25% loss in performance in an organization, 30% of the folks say they're less engaged and have decreases in morale. That supervisor has a heavy lift, but that is what they need to plan for. That becomes part of the work that the supervisors have to provide for employees like Dr. C and the other folks that she's talking to. It's just critically important.
Yes, it is. And Dr. C, as we start to wind down in our time, quickly, I want to just talk
How did
about
that
how
happen?
I know the time
Where did
just,
the time go?
I know. How are you managing your mental health? What are you doing so you can get up every day and go back into that job and deal with all of that?
Well, I am I am a woman of faith. So I will start there. That's where it starts, with prayer and meditation for me. That's where it starts. I'm also a person who believes that prayer comes with some work too. So I have to intentionally take moments in my day to step away from some of these conversations. I have to intentionally consider my assumptions and and practice what I preach. Whatever I'm sharing with others that they should be doing, I have to intentionally broaden my own perspective so that I can look at all the possibilities. And to Dr. Weaver's point about supervisors and the role of the supervisor being key, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I would add to that every supervisor is too an employee.
Yeah.
And it's beneficial that we all take a moment to recenter and recenter again.
Absolutely.
Absolutely unstable times.
Dr. Weaver, let's tell our audience what they can do, where they can go to get additional support and help through all of this as they are experiencing survivor's remorse and all of the emotions that go with it.
Well, first of all, I just want to give a shout out to Dr. C in terms of the approaches she's using to handle her survivor remorse and the pressure and tension that she feels from, and stress and pressure that she feels from folks who she's trying to support in the organization. But I would encourage, and we've talked about this in our last two shows. First of all, I would encourage each of those individuals to look at your HR manual and to understand what your rights are. Because many times we don't do that. I think the majority of people do not read their HR manual or.
That's a good point. What else can people do?
They can go to, they have EAP, Employee Assistance Programs in our organization, which are phenomenal. Those programs can identify counselors and coaches for you to talk to, and they have other resources that you can go and use. It's not just going there and saying, oh, I'm having this issue and talk through, but they'll give you resources and places to go and other things to help you kind of shape through and think about your career. And again, looking at going to your HR person to understand what they're saying. You might not always agree with what they're saying, but at least understand, get a sense of what they are saying. And again, there are other.
And therapy works. Therapy works. Therapy works. Ladies.
And their community organizations, and we're going to compile a list so we can put it on the daily.
And we'll post it on the website. Ladies, we are so out of time.
No way.
Yes, we are. I want to thank you for joining us. A special gratitude to clinical psychologist, Dr. Vanessa Weaver. Love you so much. We know this is a very complex issue impacting so many. Dr. C, thank you. We wish you the very best. We do hope this week's conversation has provided some help and relief. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, January 5th. I'm Molette Green, sitting in for Harold Fisher this week. Up next on 96.3 WHUR, The Original Quiet Storm with the Love King, Raheem Devon. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Have a good night.